I'm on the floor. Don't look over here. I couldn't see the background before going live. And if I did, I would probably have prepped a little better, but it's okay. Let me make sure that I am visible. Let's see. Okay, I think I'm visible now. I'm just going to share this link. We are live now. So I have just a little snippet of the topic we're going to talk about today. And then, because it's been a while since we've done something like that. So I think we'll start with just a little bit of the topic for today, because I think today is today the last one that we're going to be raising money for the retreat. All of money for whatever is donated today, the last Sunday and the Sunday before, everything's going to be donated and put towards the retreat, the women's retreat. Thank you guys so much for all the kind words, for the donations, for just being so positive and kind to all the girls on here, all the guests I've had on here as well. So thank you for my birthday wishes. Yeah, I'm 20. Guess how old I am? 21. I asked someone how old they thought I was the other day, and they said and I feel like everyone, including me, you always know what kind of a question that is when someone says, "Guess how old I am?" You always go like younger than the number you're actually thinking. Does anyone else do that? I'm always at least a few years younger, unless I'm like, "Oh, you're like, I know you're really young. You're probably a baby," and then I get shocked that they're not. Yep, 29. This is my last year in my 20s. I know. I'm almost 30 and I'm still coming for the order. Just kidding. Did I check my PayPal? Should I? I haven't had access to it as I've been out of town. But I can log in on here. I just I guess I haven't been doing that since I was out of town, but I will check. Thank you, Denise. You're, especially if it's a woman, always guess way younger. Ladies are 29 or younger until they say different. Yeah. And I always wondered if people were just being nice or if this is a genuine thing. A lot of the time when I would go out with my mom, people would ask if my mom was my sister. And I'm like, that's nice, but does that mean I look old or she looks young? Is that a good thing? My mom said she was 35 for years, lol. Oh, thank you, Denise. You're so sweet. What question? Oh, you sent a question on PayPal. Okay. Well, as soon as I can log in on there, I will respond to your question. So I wanted to just talk about this one. I can't find my notes, so we're just gonna have to save what I have in my notes for probably my pre-recorded big Handmaid's Tale video. But one of the things I did want to talk about that I did, sometimes I'll text myself notes of what I want to talk about, and I do have a little text of myself texting myself to talk about this one subject. So on the Handmaid's Tale, there's a scene where the handmaids are getting reassigned to new families, right? So they're packing them up because they had ran away, and now they're like, "Hey, you're getting reassigned to new families." And so it made me think of the order how they do the whole assigning process of marriage, right? And I was talking a little bit to my sister about, like, do you remember how the marriage process was as far as being a woman, right? For a man, we've talked about this, right? if you are higher up in the ranking, if you're one of Paul's kids, your chances of getting married as a man are a lot higher. Your chances go down the further away you get from being in Paul's family, right? Or in the leadership's family. So you'd have Hansons, which is where Shirley's family comes from. We know Gerald Val, his mom is Shirley and Hanson, and a lot of the Hanson men never got married, could never get a wife. Then you also have different families where even me being in the order, I just knew these men are not going to be able to get married. They're going to have to bring people in. Another big family of the men that didn't get married was Merlin's descendants. So we talked about the whole rivalry in the order, right? So we have the order's a cult, but then within the order, it's like little cults within the cult, right? Because Merlin was supposed to be the next leader, because Merlin was Ortel, the leader before him's brother. So we've talked about this before, where there's this great divide because Merlin was supposed to be the next heir to the throne. But then Ortel's favorite wife, after Ortel passes away, his favorite wife, LaDonna, is like, nope, Paul's the next leader. And then they kind of just pushed Merlin to the side. Well, that's how the legend goes. You don't hear much of that from Paul's family, right? You only hear the history that Paul wants you to know, which was Paul was chosen by God, and God wanted him to be the leader, and there's nothing you can do about it. So there's the Hansons that don't get married. There's certain different families, and Merlin's family started to have a really hard time having the men get married. You never see any of Merlin's boys marrying Kingston women. It's very, very shocking if you even see them trying to. And there also is behaviors where when the leadership sees that Merlin's family or the Hansons or these what do they call it on Harry Potter, mudbloods, when the trash starts seeping into the house, when the trash raccoon accidentally gets off the porch and tries to come in the house, they shoo them away, right? So if they start to see that these men are trying to marry their women, they're like, If they're starting to dance with these women, we had direction that you need to go work at the farm. Now in Idaho, where there's no women. So you're going to have to go over there, little raccoon. So that's the kind of the process for the men. We've talked about that a lot. So what about the assigning process for marriage for the women, right? As we've said before, it's similar thing of like marrying up, right? You gotta marry. You never see a Kingston girl marry a non-Kingston guy, really. It's very rare. There was one case that I remember that the woman basically had to leave the order to get this guy that was not a Kingston. Anyway, long story long. But so there's that whole hierarchy of, marrying up into the bloodline, like royalty, right? And it's this whole idea of you got to get and by the way, they don't tell us this. It's not like they're saying you got to marry up to get into heaven. It's just this pattern that you start to see, and you're like, oh, so every time I want to marry a guy that's not Kingston, you keep swatting my hand and then moving my head towards the Kingstons, right? So it's like this unspoken, you basically know what you're supposed to do. Thank you, Patty. You're so sweet. I appreciate it. Didn't Merlin marry 4 nieces? I don't know how many Merlin married, but he definitely had his kids marrying their siblings. Merlin was a case of he believed 100% in direction from God on who you're supposed to marry, and he didn't like that Paul and them were starting to do blood testing, because we've talked about this, right? They started to do blood testing so the kids don't get deformities. But then it raises the question, so if we're doing blood testing, we're not actually having faith in God then, because if God's directing the marriages, then what will be, right? What is God's will is inevitable. And so we need to pray and have these dreams, and I'm going to marry my sister and just have to be okay with kids with 12 toes, because that is God's will. And so that's another reason that caused the divide too, is Merlin had his ideas of how the order would be, and Paul had his ideas, right? But this is what's interesting. We talked about incest and how Ortel was the first one to marry a niece, right? His first wife was his niece. And so that's what's interesting, is I've always thought that Ortel was the first one to start dabbling in that, but Merlin had his kids marrying each other a lot. So I don't know where the idea came in that we need to be, our bloodline is so good that we need to be marrying the closest thing to us. And part of me is like, is this a narcissism thing? It's like, I'm so great that I if I could marry myself, I would, and I would have kids with myself. But I'm choosing to marry the next best thing, which is my brother, or my sister or my niece or whatever. I don't know. I have never married my brother, so I couldn't tell you. I actually ran away from that shit real fast. I was telling Cami today too. I was like, there were so many moments when I was in the order and I was watching people do things, and I was like I was born in it, and I was still like what's happening here? So many times, and even like watching my friends doing certain things for their cousin, husband, the husbands, and I was like, anyways, so besides the point, what's the grooming process? What's the assigning husband process for the women? So there's multiple different stories from different people, and from different experiences. And I've interviewed a lot of girls that have talked about how they had to fight to be with who they wanted, or had to fight to not be with who they were forcing them to be with, and also some who knew that who they were supposed to marry from a very young age. Like if we reference back to Michelle's story, when she did the podcast, we did a few episodes with her. I can't remember which episode she talks about this, but she says she knew who she was supposed to marry by the age of like 8, right? There was some families where the kids just knew. And so there was processes where you would see the parents were grooming, having the little girl start to work for the companies that the man was working at, to kind of get them associated with that person, so that years later, when the proposal happens, it feels like it's of God because it's familiar and it feels right. Oh, I know this person. I feel like I can trust this person. I worked for him, blah, blah, blah. And I can't tell you what went on behind closed doors, because how did they decide that, right? Was this family like, oh, we gave you 2 daughters, so you owe us 2 daughters? There were times where it was like, this is so interesting how this family is having like almost like swapsies. Like there was a pre-written agreement of some sort. And how would you know, okay, my 8-year-old kid is going to marry your kid when they're older. I owe a debt to you, so here, you can have her. It's so creepy when you really dissect. I've never been in the men's meetings, but I'm scared that there's something similar to that. I keep thinking of that scene on The Handmaid's Tale when the men are in the back of the limo, or in the vehicle, I can't remember, it's like a big vehicle, and they're discussing like, how are we going to get these women to be on board with what basically the disgusting, forceful things that they're going to be doing to these handmaids. How are we going to get them on board? And they're like, oh, we just have to put the Bible behind it. The women will do anything if we say this, this, and that, and we just da-da-da-da. And so like it's like this very creepy way of, this is all a game so that we can get what we want, and this is how we control the women. And they were very like nonchalant about how terrible they are being to these women. I have this nightmare that there's meetings like that in the order all the time. It's like, hey, who's going to marry this one? No one wants this one. Someone's got to get her before she so that we can bring more babies to this earth. And there's times too where it's like, okay, this guy has this many pretty wives. Okay, we got to give you one of the wives that no one wants, because she's got to procreate, and you got to take one for the team. You see that a lot too in you see Paul married to a few of his sisters, Jesse married to a few of his sisters, Daniel married to a few. It's almost like they calculated, okay, we're gonna have 3 each. It's so weird how it all is. But anyways, I'm just like assuming things. I'm like racking my brain. I'm not saying exactly what I know goes on behind closed doors over there, but from what you see, it feels very orchestrated, right? So and we also have some stories from girls that were having these men prey on them, right? Having not just the predator, but the dad being like, hey, this person is who I had direction that God wants you to marry, right? For example, for me, I kept going for the guys that weren't related to me. I had a thing for people who weren't related to me. So I was going for this boy. The first one was this boy that was from Idaho. But he was from the Brown family. You didn't see a lot of the Browns marrying Kingstons. it was very Romeo and Juliet, if you very what's a generic incest name? I was gonna say Romeo and Juliet, not Adam and Eve, Adam and Steve, I don't know, whatever. So he Alabama Romeo and Juliet, dare I say. I just had a thing for guys that I didn't grow up with, sharing the same mom and dad. I'm trying to think how I could make that funnier. Anyways, okay, so I really liked this boy, and my dad goes, and he did not want me to marry this boy. They had someone else in mind for me. That I had no, in hindsight, I know the whole picture now, but at the time I'm like, I prayed, I got direction, I feel like he's the one. I've done all the steps that you told me to do, I fasted. And my dad goes, I don't know who you're supposed to marry, but I know it's not him. So they're very like, they're just gonna herd you into the right direction, right? And that makes it feel like, especially when you're a young little girl, it feels like you are getting direction on who they want, because when they make you hang around the one that they want, they make you work around the one that they want you to marry. Of course, you're going to start having dreams of that person. Of course, you're going to start thinking that they might have to be a choice because they're in your circle so much. So you have to consider them, right? So on top of that, love your life therapy. You are amazing. Oh, thank you. Is that the inbred name, Winston? Sorry, you guys have a lot of good questions in here, and I'm gonna see if I can go back to them. I just don't want to lose my train of thought. Our whole assignment thing is there. So there's a process of, definitely people, we're assigning them as in this person is going to marry this person by the time they're this age. We're just going to make sure we groom them to get them to accept it. And then there really, I feel like, is moments where Paul's kids will tell Paul who they want. And then Paul will go, okay, my kid wants that one. We're going to get him. And then you would hear things like, oh, this person was like trying to be engaged to this person. And then all of a sudden they married Paul's kid, like took a 180. Or like they're in the process to marry this person and they both got the direction. They're both having meetings with Paul. And then all of a sudden Paul will make sure that none of his kids want him first. And sometimes Paul's meetings, because no one can get engaged until they have that meeting with Paul, right? They have to have the leadership's approval. And I really believe that Paul does that so he can be like, wait, who is it that you're trying to marry? Oh, okay, yeah, you can have that one. Oh, nope, that one's for mine, But he doesn't say that. He's like, if it's one that his son wants, I just think we really need to keep praying about this. You really got to keep praying until you realize that one's for my kid. Or I don't think he's ever flat out said no. He's just really good at like going in a roundabout way. Thank you, Melissa. You're so sweet. Hi, Crystal. Thank you. I've gotten compliments on this shirt a lot, and I wonder if it's because I have the green eyes and the green, or if it just looks, I don't know. I feel very Catwoman in it. But thank you. So yeah, so you have the process, right, of who they already have decided is someone that they're going to marry. And then I think there's times where Paul's kids get first dibs, and Paul's kids will try to swoop in and marry the girl they want. And sometimes I wonder if it's when the girl matures and she's pretty, then all of a sudden Paul's kids are having direction on them. And I've also been so curious, like, what happens when two of these high up numbered men want the same girl? And in the order history, we've talked about this before, where there used to be dating, there used to be courting. And here's what I think happened. Too many times was the leadership jealous that someone else was dating his property, right? Someone that was supposed to be his. It's like these men who already have 15 wives, they're getting mad that someone else is courting and dating someone that they want. And so then they revoked the dating process. They revoked the courting process. But here's the crazy thing. There still technically is a form of that that these married men do behind the backs of their wives. It's such a weird dynamic, and I was kind of mapping it out today of like, it's so crazy how like olden day king and queen, restrictive, what's the word I'm looking for? Just like is that the right word? Barbaric? Because it's so possessive of these women, and it's like a brownie points, not brownie point, it's like a trophies, and they have so much, like, they get off on the fact that they are having the most kids in the order, or having the most wives in the order, or having the most, and people ask all the time, well, how do these men take care of them? They don't take care of them. And a lot of the times the wives end up taking care of the other wives that are not capable. So you think of it this way. You have this whole, let's say you have 10 wives, okay? You're a man who married 3 sisters, 4 nieces. You're looking at, your daughters. Just kidding. There's no line, it feels like. But so you have 10 wives, and you're not supporting any of them financially or in any way, shape, or form. But the women are supporting all the kids and whatever. If you have one wife that just can't keep a job, or she can't seem to pay her rent, she can't seem to, what are they going to do? They can't kick him out. So they have the other wives take care of that debt of hers. If one wife is falling short, the rest have to take care of that one. We talked about the woman that was forced to get married, who had her mind was like of an 8 or 9-year-old. They forced her into polygamy because there's no choice at that point. This woman is mentally disabled. You were forcing her into marriage. So they forced her into this family. And who do you think took care of her kid that she couldn't take care of the kid that they've also forced her to have? It becomes the other wife's problem. Now it's like whatever the man decides to do, the women have to take care and pick up the pieces in the mess of it, right? It's like, it's so, and I look back on it all the time, like, what do these women get out of it? Because again, while I was in the order, I was like, why are you guys, what are you doing? Like, you pay for his schooling, you pay all the bills, you have all the children, you work every day, and he gives you eternal life? Eternal life of what? What's your eternity gonna look like, sweetums? Taking care of all of his extra wives in heaven too? When he gets a bunch more? Great. That's great. Super duper. Anyway, so for the assigning process for a mentally disabled woman, or a woman who is not, and another sad thing is a lot of them don't go to doctors, so we don't really know. Like, there could be people with autism, there could be people with, other mental things that need to have extra care or have extra help, or you can't treat a child with autism the same as a child that doesn't have autism, or a child with ADHD, or a child, you know what I mean? So, but they don't take them to the doctor, so they're all lumped into one, and they all have the same, robotic duty. And so it's like, when there is an obvious person that isn't mentally to the same level, it's weird, they take longer, at least from what I saw, it took longer for those girls to get married. What I mean by longer is they were like maybe 21, 22, which is like old maid over here. Thank you. You're so sweet, little V. I appreciate it. But so we would joke about how they had to have been having meetings, right, with these men being like, nose goes, I don't want that one. Someone's got to take her, but I'm not doing it. I already got this one last time. I joke about it, but I feel like it's very real. Like, hey, I married this one, so you have to marry that one. I took one for the team, because they do distribute them pretty well. You never see one guy with all of the rejects, right? And you oftentimes see Paul's kids with all the really beautiful ones and all the really put together ones. And I remember asking that in the order, like, it's so interesting how Paul's kids only have direction on the pretty girls. So interesting. because direction's supposed to be from God, right? It's God's will. It's the predetermined family that you had in heaven. That's what they tell us. Like, you need to marry the right choice, the right one, the one you're supposed to, so that you can have the children that are in heaven, waiting for you to pick daddy, right? They're waiting for you to pick the right guy so that they can come down to this earth. And that begs another question. So I marry the wrong guy. Where do those kids come from? Satan? Whenever I think back on all the times I questioned all these different things, the logic of the order was very, it wasn't designed to question, because they didn't have the answers. It's interesting. They'd be like, you have to make sure that you marry the right one so that you can have the right kids. And they just never plan for someone saying, well, what if you marry the wrong one? Then you have the wrong kids? It's like they never planned for someone to ask that question. Or maybe their brain just never thought that. So when I was asking it, they were like, and they would just be like, are you questioning God? You know that it's a sin to question God. It's like, okay, then why even tell me anything? Why even explain to me that I need to make sure that this is so important so that I'll have the right kids? Why even explain that to me if you're not going to explain what happens if you don't? You know? So interesting. Anyway, I love how you noticed that. Is that Eskel's old apartment? Because Eskel had a sewing machine. One time I came to Eskel's house and I wanted to cook something in his oven. And this is how often he cooked in his oven. I opened his oven to cook a pizza, and there was a sewing machine with all of the stuff, like the fabric and whatever, in the oven. I was like, what is this, storage? Anyways, I'm ready for a few questions. We're already 26 minutes in. I would love to talk further about the marriage process and all of that. If you have more questions, I did see a comment that said something about wives. Like, I don't know who said it, and it's all the way up here. Something about if a man has multiple wives. Did you guys see that? It was like, as if I had 50 wives. Denise, I just turned 50 in June, and mine's to the happy birthday, late birthday, Darcy. Thank you, Mark. Kinks and girls are absolutely beautiful. It's actually shocking. So inbreeding, when done right, makes cute children without 12 toes. And that's something I wondered, because you can't deny that a lot of these girls, you watch them on Escaping Polygamy, they're very beautiful. A lot of them are very pretty. And some people, this is an argument that a lot of order people say. So Brother David, I remember him saying, we are so lucky to be in the order, because when you're doing God's will, this is exactly how I'm just kidding. He doesn't sound like that, but I just like to make fun of him because he went to prison for raping his niece, so I can make fun of him all I want. He's like, when you're doing God's will, he really blesses you with the most beautiful kids ever. Meanwhile, he's really, just look him up, just Google him. So they would say like, oh, we're blessed with such beautiful genetics because we're God's kingdom, da 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 da. And then some people will argue that the Kingston gene is actually very pretty. Like when you look at LaDonna when she was younger, she was really pretty, and like that the genetics that most of the order has came from one pretty person. I don't know. I've had different mixed things because I've also noticed, and maybe this is just me being biased, when I was in the order, I thought none of the men were attractive. Very few men. Sorry, I shouldn't say none. Very few men were attractive. And so I had this theory. I was like, oh, well, the girls are pretty. You can't deny that, but the men are not. And then I've argued this back and forth with other ex-members. They're like, no, there are some. They're just your relatives, so you don't think that they're attractive. I'm like, but I can acknowledge that the women are beautiful. And so I've argued back and forth that theory of the beauty of people in the order. And I think that I have all kinds of theories, but maybe there's a blood testing that makes them throw out the ugly genes and keep the cute genes. I don't know. But I also felt like women, all the pretty women that you guys got to see are the women that got out. And these are also the women that understood that they could get more opportunities if they kept their looks up. And this is just my theory. So they keep their looks up, they look nice and presentable to the point where even outsiders are being attracted to that. And then they start to think, I could potentially leave and not be on the streets because this person sees value in me over here, but you guys are making me think that I have no value unless I stay here. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of the ones you see are the ones, I guess, that had the confidence to get out in a way. I don't know. But this is my theory. I don't know if I made any sense just now. But I do agree. I think that a lot of, like, Priscilla's gorgeous. I think my sisters are beautiful. But also too, like, I see their, like, hearts too, and I'm like, they're so pretty inside and out. And then maybe that's also why I think that a lot of the boys are ugly. I'm like, ew, gross. Because I've heard them say word for word, oh, I had direction on this baby. Like, you hear the stories too, them talking so great about their grandpa. They'll have this, I will never stop forgetting. I will never forget this story of the picture of the guy's grandpa holding the baby, and that's the mom. So sorry, it looks like a grandpa and he's holding a baby, right? And they keep it in the home like it's this is when dad knew that he was gonna marry mom. And like it's a cute direction from God moment, but it's literally pedophilia. You are promoting pedophilia. Dad knew he was gonna marry mom when she was not even 1 year old. So that's why I'm saying, like, I think when you hear people promoting stuff like that all the time and promoting these like really disgusting ways of thinking, you just instantly like they're ugly. Ugly and set it out. And I'm a true believer too in when I meet someone and I start to really like them genuinely as a person, and I can see their true colors and it's beautiful, they're more attractive to me. Like they really become physically more attractive to me. Do you get annoyed that mainstream Mormons try to relate with you being in a cult? I feel it's not even comparable to what you went through. Um, I don't feel like a lot of Mormons do that. It's only people who don't fully it's people who are like, "Oh yeah, I've heard of the Mormons," and they try to put what I went through in the same category as Mormons because that's all they've heard of. So they'll be like, "Oh yeah, like Joseph Smith. Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah." And I'm like, "Yeah, whatever." People that have come from Mormonism usually don't lump them like Shalise. Every time she interviews me, she's like, "I feel like there's no comparison." But there's a lot of similarities because we believed in Joseph Smith, right? Um, so yeah, I wouldn't say it really annoys me if they do. It annoys me when someone will when I'm trying to figure out why they're asking me about my cult upbringing. Because there's a difference between someone's like, oh my gosh, that happened, that's crazy. So, and they're genuinely interested in you as a person and your story, right? Like, you're so strong. They value the information you're giving and they value the knowledge, right? There's that, and you feel seen and you feel heard. Versus someone being like, so what else happened? Did you get beat? What'd your dad do? That is like, okay, so I'm a zoo animal to you, and you want to poke me and make me dance for you and entertain you, you know? That's when it's like, okay, shut up. And I've had a hard time trying to figure out which is which. And there's a lot of people who come from the order who just don't share their story at all because they've shared it to the wrong people. And they thought that the person actually cared about them, but they were just like, and what else? And what else? I bet you did that, huh? Did you have to be engaged to your brother? And it's like gross. It's like, why are you talking to me like that? And it's like they see through you. They're not looking in your eyes, they're like looking through you. They don't care about you existing in front of them. Does that make sense? You don't feel valued, you don't feel validated. It's not for them to listen to you and care about the story and validate your feelings and what you went through. It's not a therapeutic experience. It's all for their personal gain. So I've learned that lesson the hard way too in relationships as an adult, right? With friends and family and people that you decide to have a relationship with. You accidentally think that they care about you. Or and this is how you can tell though, is when you're with that person, do you feel like it's therapeutic? Do you feel like do you feel energized when you're with them? Or do you feel depleted? It took me so long to figure that one out. I seen a video that your mom posted of your dad and mom. They both look very thin. Yes. Um, I feel like my dad has fluctuated a lot. My mom lost a lot of weight since the show aired. She's lost, I want to say 100 pounds. And then my dad, I feel like fluctuates because there was times where he did, like, I don't know if he did, it was a 40-day fast, but you'll see numbered men too, where I remember being in the order and be like, we haven't seen Hiram Kingston in a long time. And then he shows up to church and he's half the size because he was doing a 40-day fast. So some of them do it for numbered men are assigned every single day a numbered man is fasting, right? And I think they go in order to where, like, so my dad's number is 36. So it's like, okay, 36, your turn, and then he'll fast. And then whoever's number is 37, tomorrow is your turn. And so there's always someone fasting for the order. At least this is what I was told when I was growing up in the order. And then I believe they do a system too of 40-day fasts, where either they feel called to do a 40-day fast or someone feels called to tell them to do one, which that's a death sentence. People have died on these fasts. And you can't, if you eat meat, red meat, after a 40-day fast, you will die. Like, you have to be very careful how you come off of these fasts. And they're not doctors in there. I don't think anybody should ask somebody like that those questions. I think they should be ready to listen. If the person that experienced the call wants to talk about it, they should never ask. Yeah, I 100% believe in that too. But when you come from this cult where the leadership feels owed your money, your body, right? Because they're signing you up for marriage and babies and your cattle at such a young age. They're looking at you. I remember even thinking this in the order. I'm like, they're looking at me like I'm a dollar sign. Even my parents, like, what's my tax return going to look like because I have you, and my food stamps that I'm going to get because I have you. And I would hear them talking about, if you have this many kids, then you can have this much in your tax return. But if you have too many kids, then you can only get the tax break for this many. So then they would have other people claiming other people's kids so they could get more money. And so you hear this talk and you're like, I am literally just a dollar sign to these people that are supposed to be like my loving parents. So of course, when you come from that and you get out into the real world and someone's like, so did your dad beat you? Did this, that, blah, blah, then it doesn't like shock you when someone's talking to you like that, because the leadership did stuff like that to you all the time, you know? So where were you? Where'd you go? Did you break any order standards? Did you do anything that a slut would do? You know, like, you're talked to like that. So like, you leave and it's just the normal. And the sad thing is, the healthy stuff is the abnormal. Someone's nice to you and you're like, why are you being nice to me? What do you want from me? I did that a lot. And so I would run towards the more toxic stuff, because I'm like, this is familiar. Even though I feel sick when I'm around these people, I feel drained all the time. This is like my childhood. And I think a lot of us can relate to that, right? If we grew up with narcissistic parents that were very unhealthy, and we got very used to that type of a mindset and seeing that, we never saw something healthy. So why would we go seeking it when we don't even know what it looks like? You know, it's kind of like, if you lived in this world and you never saw the color pink, you never know what you're missing, and you're not going to go try to find it because you don't even know what it is. I live in Salt Lake City. I know many Kingston kids who work hard and try hard, no judgment. And this is some of the most hardworking kids are in the order. And it's sad, because why are they working so hard at such a young age? And then half of them are not even seeing any of that money. Half of them, it's going towards paying rent to their mom and dad. Like, it's a sad life for a lot of these kids. And it's really frustrating to see the ones who profit the most off of it are these old dudes. Thank you, Donna. Kids should be kids, yeah. And you see this, and Gerald talks about it a lot. Val talks about it on his channel, how he became very parentified because he was the oldest. And then he became, you know, instinctively looking after these kids that are not even his. And then when he is not in the order anymore, he gets them ripped from him. Like, it's such a quick You have to grow up so quick in that kind of a lifestyle to survive. And I think a lot of you guys can relate, and maybe we're in households as kids where you did have to grow up pretty quick, whether or not you had a lot of siblings that you had to take care of, or was it that your parents weren't emotionally there for you, so you had to grow up and realize quick, okay, I cannot go to my parents for these things that I need to be nurtured, but my parents aren't going to give me that. So either you suppress it or you look for it in other unhealthy ways. And that was how you had to essentially grow up too fast, not get to be a child because your parent was too worried about their other stuff. I was talking to Cami about this today too. A lot of the times, women in the order, the kids just get the worst end of it because these women are so involved in this relationship with this man who's the head of the household. Paul's the man on the watchtower, and they're so focused on this that the kids get left behind. The man is on the pedestal, and the kids are to be taken advantage of and to serve, like how they're like, how could a kid even teach a parent anything? Kids are just kids. So the kids are just treated as like not even human, right? And then the mom is so focused on this relationship with the dad, and then there's so much jealousy and tension, especially when she's sharing him with her sister. And so then the kids get this lashing out from the parents every time mom feels like she's not getting love from her husband, or she has to watch him leave to go sleep with her sister, finding out that her sister's pregnant the same week. They're due the same week, her and her sister. Can you imagine the mental turmoil that happens? And then the kids that suffer because of the emotional toxicity that's happening, and it transfers to the kids. Thank you for the donation, Brooke. Do you mind if we put the Kingston family tree online, probably including Discord? Yeah, if you have it, do it. Go for it. I need to do, so what do you guys think of this? I thought about this because I love doing creepy story for my cult. It's not the best. My most viewed video is not creepy story for my cult, right? Yet I do creepy stories for my cult every year in October. And I'm running out of creepy stories. But then I realized almost all the stories from the order are a little bit creepy. So what if this year, so I know last year we did, I think we did a story of the baby in the trunk. We've done the story of the case of the missing finger, right? We've done the story of, done a lot of creepy stuff. We also talked about how Krishna Venta was kind of involved with the order, and Krishna Venta is the guy that had his own followers commit suicide bombing with him. We talked about the planet Neophrades, which is where Krishna Venta was from, and how he somehow knew, I think he knew Merlin Kingston the most, actually. They were friends in the military or something along those lines. So we talked about a bunch of different interesting stories, but what do you guys think of this series this October? We'll have 4 episodes come out, and all we really do is dive into the family trees. Talk about how many wives Daniel Kingston has, how many kids roughly he has. We'll talk about how he was engaged to Shirley at the same time as Jessica and Andrea's mom, and how Shirley watched Daniel marry her a week before he married Shirley. And then we'll kind of just dissect the relations, how many of them have a wife that's their sibling. And like Joe Robinson talks about how he's like, yeah, my mom is my dad's half sister, and then my dad married 2 more of her sisters, right? So we can also talk about how many of these sisters are sisters, and then also his sister, right? Is that interesting to you guys? Because you guys get really fascinated by by the family tree, and I want to give that to you, as well as I think it's good to have that information public. I think it's really good. Paul and his brothers aren't going to be around forever. Maybe when they're gone, we will see some change. I think that that's the part of it that sucks, is like, okay, when they die or whatever happens, here's my prediction. There's going to probably be a split off. There's going to be an argument about who the next leader is, like there is every time there's a new leader. And there might become a splinter group, kind of like how FLDS, they made the what's the group Calvin's in? His is in a split off from the FLDS, even though it's it's a street over, right? They kind of just started their own centennial group. They started their own centennial group because they couldn't get along with how the leadership was. They decided that they should have a quorum. These ones had one leader. So I think that's what's going to happen. They're going to get new leaders in the order eventually, and then there's going to be some fighting about if it was of Heavenly Father or not, and then who knows how much better it really is going to be, you know? Because you would think that it wouldn't have gotten this bad. It didn't start bad. It started progressively getting worse. And I think the only reason we're going to see any change is the more people that start talking about it, the less secrets, right? And the less we brush things under the rug. That actually sounds so interesting. Daniel has 14 wives. Yeah. Okay, good. So you guys do want to know the genetics of the wives that Daniel has. We'll pick 4. How about maybe we could do Daniel? We already did Paul's, but we could do Daniel's. I would love to do Daniel's because I roast him every time I talk about Daniel. I roast him. David too. Don't like him. Hate him. Never liked him. So Daniel, David, Jesse. Let's think of who the 4th one would be. Because I also have to be able to get all the information. I was like amazed that I was able to get all of Paul's information. It was because that's 27. Merlin didn't splinter off from Paul. Yeah, but so it was kind of like a cult within a cult, right? Because Merlin wanted to be the leader. Well, he was supposed to be the leader, but so Merlin was still in the order and died in the order, but there was a split. And you never saw Paul's girls or the girls in this side marry over into Merlin's family, right? So it was kind of like, even though Merlin's family was the royalty bloodline, it became almost as if they weren't now. Any full siblings been married to each other? No. But I did hear of, and I wasn't in the room when this happened, but I heard that one man asked Brother Paul if he could marry his own daughter. I did hear that. And you know what the creepy thing is that it was like he truly thought that God wanted him to marry his own daughter. Can you imagine if you were the daughter and you're like, but I guess there's so many terrible things that have happened in the order. It's like, at that point, you're like, well, Dad's a freak. What did I think was going to happen? Did I think he was going to draw the line at protecting me? Fat chance. What about Jason for the 4th brother? Jason would be very interesting too, because then we would also dive into the death of his first wife, which was his half sister, and she was only 15. That one's a very sad one. That one would be. We have already dove a little bit into that, and I'll leave the link to that one when I make that video. I guess if you guys haven't seen that one, that's a very interesting one. Yeah, we could do Jason's. I think I could put that one together. Yeah, Jason is Jacob's dad. You guys heard Jacob's story. Who is Michelle's dad? That was Jesse. Yep. Michelle's dad is Jesse, and Michelle's mom is Jesse's niece. And Jesse also married, I think, 2 half-sisters, 2 of my dad's full sisters. So it gets so confusing. I'm definitely going to be bringing the tape out and be like, okay, so red means siblings, green means married. Jesse married 3 of Amanda's dad's sisters. They were the 1st, 3rd, and 5th wives. The 1st and 5th wives have passed away. Good job. Very good job. Yeah. Jesse, the wife that passed away most recently, there was a debate about what exactly happened, but she was on a fast when she died. And yeah, it's sometimes, and this is just my own theory, but sometimes, like, if you knew Jesse and how evil he really is, it feels like, and maybe this sounds crazy, but he sucks the life out of anyone that he's around. Like, he's so terrible that it is not that shocking that he had 2 wives die so young. And sometimes I feel like their bodies were just shutting down, having to put up with someone like Jesse. And I really think that that happens more often than we think. Like, being with someone who's so terrible slowly kills you. They have no regard for your well-being. They just care about themselves. You slowly die. It's torture. I'm thinking of various types of sabotage, brings me back to college. Malignant narcissist, yep. So malignant narcissist is just the step under a psychopath. So you have a psychopath, malignant narcissist, and then you have, what is it, communal narcissist, covert, overt narcissist, whatever else. So what makes a psychopath? I was watching this video, and they were like, a psychopath, what did they say? All serial killers are psychopaths, but not all psychopaths are serial killers. And isn't it crazy that it's like psychopath and serial killer, there's this blurred line, right? Because psychopaths don't give a shit about anyone but themselves. But then you go a step down, there's the malignant narcissist. So it's like, if you ever know a malignant narcissist, run the other way. Any narcissist, just don't even pay mind to them. Are you saying Jesse is worse than Daniel? So there's a debate on this. We've heard so many stories about how terrible Daniel is because there's so many of his kids finally talking about it. Daniel was so abusive, and Daniel, he would abuse his kids in front of people. He was so like sloppy about his temper. Jesse was more calm and collected. So people thought that Jesse wasn't as crazy as Daniel. But when you hear the stories that like Michelle has and some of the kids that dare talk about how crazy Jesse was, I remember talking to one of Jesse's kids while I was in the order, and they knew they were in trouble and that they had to deal with Jesse when they came home from work that day, and they tried to kill themselves so they did not have to be in the same room as Jesse that night. Like that's the kind of fear that a lot of those kids had. And I'm not saying that Daniel's kids didn't have that. There was probably a lot of that as well over there. But there's a debate on who was actually worse, because, I mean, have you seen the story that me and Michelle came out with about baby Rhoda and how baby Rhoda passed away? So yeah, sorry, I'm not trying to be like, well, let's tally it up on who's worse. Are you joining? Are you trying to see?
Sure. What?
We're talking about some really traumatic stuff.
Oh no.
But someone asked, do you think Jesse's worse than Daniel?
Interesting.
Would you say yes or no?
Jesse versus Daniel?
Yeah, because I was trying to explain that Daniel, you heard more stories about Daniel, and because Daniel was so, his temper controlled him. So you could see like, whoa, he's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And you heard it from all of his kids, and his kids all hated him, right?
Right.
But then with Jesse, he was more calm and collected, and he kept it under wraps more, right?
Yeah, I kind of just think that somehow he kept it under wraps more, because I've heard pretty crazy stories about him.
Yeah. I think that they all have their level of craziness, but there's a reason why mostly Daniel's kids leave. And I still don't understand fully. Maybe I could ask Gerald that. But and maybe part of it is that Marianne paved that way for them. Because you guys know the story of Marianne running because she didn't want to be married to her Uncle David, and Marianne's in Daniel's family. And so maybe because for me, I didn't hear that story till actually someone in Merlin's family told me. And I was like, what? And I was like 16 at the time. But when you're in Daniel's family, that's going to whisper through that family a lot. And you're going to have to decide if you want to believe the lies that they said, which was, oh, she got drunk with all of her friends and her friends beat her up. She lied. Daniel didn't actually beat her up. You have to either believe that lie, which is such a lie. She was in Washakie. Where was her friends that were feeding her alcohol in Washakie? And how did she even make those friends if she was isolated her whole life?
Right.
Like, did overnight she just made all these friends and brought them all back to Washakie?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. But so that was the story that even some of Daniel's kids believed and said, yeah, she made it up. She was just embarrassed because she was getting drunk with all of her friends and then they beat her up. Or you have to believe the side of, oh, they're all lying to me right now. I'm surrounded by liars. And I know because Daniel beats me. So why would I believe this lie? Because I've seen him beat kids. He's not above beating kids. It's interesting. Everyone's saying hi, Cami.
Hi, everybody.
Diana says that Baby Rhoda video was so hard to get through. I had to take a lot of breaks. Oh yeah, filming it and editing it was really hard too. And the crazy thing is, like, I don't want to say everyone in the order knows the story and knows exactly what happened, but there are so many people that remember when that happened, and they don't even like to talk about it because it makes them feel. And I can understand, you feel like an accomplice because you know who actually did it. And at what point are you stepping back and being a part of the issue, right? Especially if you're a witness. At some point, you have to step with Jesse and support that, or move forward and support the truth. And there's all these things that they think that they're doing. They're protecting the work of the Lord. They're protecting a numbered man, and you don't want to go against the work of the Lord. But at the end of the day, you had to pick a side. You chose the wrong side. But there was a lot of moments like that in the order. Do you ever feel like that where you're watching something go down, an obvious injustice, and no one does anything? I remember you telling me a story of the kid that was throwing up. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to share that?
Yeah, I vaguely remember that.
It just wasn't natural for people to give empathy.
Yeah, to help out. Like, I just remember seeing the kid throw up in the hallway at church, and nobody did anything. And I was like going over there, like, whose kid is this?
And he was just all by himself.
Yeah, all by himself.
Lifestyle where everyone's constantly like
survival mode.
Yeah, you're in such a survival mode that you're just like that part of your brain has to switch off because you cannot care about anything outside of your road. And then it just creates all of these people that kind of implement or give off the vibe that it's just a bunch of narcissists. But I think it's just when you get into such a survival mode, you don't have the capacity anymore to care about empathy, emotions, because your will get in the way of you doing the Lord's work. Mm-hmm. So you got to turn off jealousy, you got to turn off, and then everything gets shut off. Yeah. And you become kind of an ass. And they also beat it out of you, I feel like. I feel like when you start to have empathy for other people, you start to care too much about others. They're like, no. In a way of like, what about like an outsider? So what, this outsider's going to hell? Yes, they are. Right. And you're like, okay.
Well, and they convince you per se that you are doing the Lord's work by being
a bad person.
Yeah, like I remember also people like tattletelling on each other, right? It's like, oh, this person is, I don't even know what we tattle about, talking to a boy or talking, like really small things, but it's like you have to tattletale on your sister, or you have to tattle on someone because you're saving their salvation.
Yeah. And then you feel this, that's true, because it's also this, like, you're in this predicament where you're like, I really love this person, so I want them to come to heaven with me, so I'm going to get them in trouble. And then I had times where I'm like, oh, I was the reason they got beat, and now I feel bad that I made them get beat. But I was very in this limbo place. Yeah, they put you in such a weird place. That's what's so messed up, though. It's like, so my responsibility is your salvation. There's a lot of that where it's like, you're responsible for other people at such a young age too. And even like, I think they really made our half-sister feel really guilty when I left, because they knew that I didn't like her because of how mean she was to me. And I was open about everything she said and did. And that really haunted her, that my salvation was stripped from me because you made me feel bullied enough to leave the order. So there's it's interesting how they talked a lot about that in the order too, where you have to really try to get your forgiveness, right? Remember, they would always talk about, oh, this person came back to them in a dream to try to beg for forgiveness. Why? Where does that come from? Just a shame, guilt thing to control you?
I think so. I think they also just utilized forgiveness.
Held it over your head.
Yeah, that was like, it's such an important thing to be able to get forgiveness for all of your sins, right? Anything you do bad, you need to ask for forgiveness and go through all those steps to be able to clear your name, basically.
Oh yeah, they had steps of forgiveness. One was feel sorry, know that you did something wrong, feel sorry,
Right.
ask for forgiveness, and then make it right,
yeah.
and then never do it again.
Yeah.
So when I left the order, actually recently, like a couple of years ago, I didn't understand when someone would say sorry and then not try to never do it again. Because in the order it was like, you do not say sorry unless you know you're never going to do it again.
Right.
And so when people out here would be like, I'm sorry, and then they would do it again, I'm like, you're not sorry because you just did it again. But I do think that's a good mindset to be like, don't just forgive someone and be stupid.
Yeah.
And then they just keep doing it over and over and over.
Right.
But I also feel like to them it was like this holding it over your head of like, if you ever mess up, there's this huge process you got to go through to make it right. And then they also went beyond saying that like making a sin is like a nail in the wall. When you repent, the nail comes out, but there's still the hole. Yeah. So they really pull on that shame and fear and guilt, and you're so afraid to go to hell because you're making so many mistakes, and then you're not honest anymore. Yeah. I think that's also what created the we knew so many guys where their reputation mattered so much more than what they actually did. Yeah, exactly. It's like, how do you not realize that you're being so fake right now? Yeah. And this is not who you really are. But maybe they think that it is.
Yeah, I don't know. There was definitely a lot of people that protected their reputation above all else, which made no sense.
Yeah. But maybe it's that they understand that they get opportunities taken away from them if their reputation's not good. I don't know. Yeah. Or it gets just beat out of them and they're just like, nope. I remember I learned really quick to just lie. Even if they say they saw you somewhere, no, you didn't.
I remember when you got caught one time that I was with you, and then you like admitted everything, and I come to you, I'm like, why did you tell him everything?
Because he knew, but
like, no, they didn't.
Yeah, he made it seem like he knew everything, and so I just folded, and I told him, yes, I was sneaking out, and I did this, and I did that, and I'm sorry, and you're so riddled with guilt, and then you realize all they knew was that all he knew was that my half brother had told on me that I was texting a boy.
Yep.
But I was like, I kissed him, I'm sorry, and Dad literally was just like calmly like, I knew that, yeah. And I knew that one.
I remember making an entire note of admitting all the stuff that I like did with the first guy that I had a crush on.
Yeah, I remember
so
that.
I admitted it all and asked for forgiveness, and I remember Dad reading it all and then saying, let's kneel down and pray and ask for forgiveness.
And then it was over?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. For that one in particular. But I think it was because I didn't really do that much. Like,
yeah,
the closest I did was hold hands with him. Yeah. And I, like, in detail wrote down all the things that I did with him that was wrong.
And one time I thought about kissing him.
Yeah.
And last night I dreamt about it.
And so I think he read it and was like, this is
very innocent, yeah. This is also why you couldn't have a journal in the order, because they would purposefully go through those things and be like, okay, so she's doing all this stuff, and now and they would say stuff like, I had a dream you were doing this. Yeah. That's because they read your diary. Yeah. Jacob Swanson said that his dad did this, his mom. So did he ever tell you the story? He finds a tracker on himself. They put this tracker in hair gel. Oh, I didn't tell you this. So he's running away and he's like, how do they keep finding me? And the mom goes, the Holy Ghost gave us an impression. Like, so the last time that they meet up, and yeah, he knows though at this point that there was a tracker. So she goes, the Holy Ghost, and he goes, really? It's not because you put a tracker in my bag? Did the Holy Ghost tell you to do that?
Wow.
She's like, what? It's crazy how much they did that stuff though. Stuff that just came naturally to them, or that they like opened the book and figured it out, then they're like, oh, God told me. Yeah. And then we're these kids that still believe in Santa Claus. Yeah. So we're like, wow, right. God's just like talking to you every day, huh? Why is he talking to me? So crazy. No, never ever admit anything unless you know they have you locked up tight. Yeah. Could use a secret language in a notebook. Me and Rachel did make a secret language. But we can only say like 4 things to each other, because I'd be like, no, remember, plug means the. That means this. And she's like, oh, okay. Like, dang it. The Catholic Church also relies on guilt to keep kids in a state of uncertainty and fear. I could never believe that God could want anyone to live that way. Yeah. What kind of a God wants you to constantly be ashamed and afraid and humiliated? And it also just creates people that don't trust anyone. You don't feel like you can open up and trust, and then you're in this forever state of never healing. You can never heal because you're so focused on surviving in a lifestyle you don't even like. It's like, it's so sad. Caitlin, God never talks to me. How rude.
How rude.
I knew at 5 years old not to have a diary. My sister. I learned never to have light up shoes because of trying to ditch my ex-husband when he was going to be a jerk. That's funny. Well, it's not funny, but it's like you learn these things that once you're in a healthy, healed place, those things you don't need anymore. Yeah. But when you're still trying to get into a safe place, it's good to have those tools to be able to get you to that safer spot. And you learn it from, sadly, having to figure out how to, I mean, it's smart. You learn how to evolve and to survive in those situations. I started my life as a Catholic, but even at Sunday school, I was a skeptic. God seemed like he had mental illness or something. Well, the God that they believed in the order really sounds like a jealous boyfriend.
Yeah.
Like,
like toxic.
Let me see how much I can put you through, and then I'll think about rewarding you.
Yourself through sacrifice. All this stuff. But it's like, to me, honestly, that is also a very kind of selfish way of viewing God, because then it's like, you really think that you, an imperfect person that will never be perfect, is going to be able to do enough to prove that you are capable of
pleasing him,
or being close to, say, that they claim that, Christ is the perfect lamb.
Right.
You think that you can do enough good things, have enough good actions to be comparable to that? No.
Yeah. I always felt like the reason why, because I didn't start hearing about the atonement and a lot about Christ until I left. And I think the reason why is because the story of Christ shows that he sacrificed himself for our sins, so that we may be forgiven. But they don't want to hyper focus on that, because then that gives us the wrong idea that we can be forgiven, and they need that fear to still be in there. They don't want us to be too relaxed, because then we're over there thinking we can get forgiven when we can't. They don't want us to be messing up, because then it messes up their money or their women or their success. So ridiculous. Happy birthday, my fellow Virgo. Aw, happy birthday. Thank you. So I have a question for you, Cami. You have a very, can we talk about Christ with you and how, okay, so I had a really hard time not having that toxic relationships afterwards, right, with God. Like, I still felt like, oh, this bad thing's happening to me. Is it because God's mad at me, or whatever backlash or whiplash or PTSD from the order? Where do you feel like you are now with your idea of God, and how did you get there?
I believe that your connection with Christ is a lifelong journey. Like, there's a reason why there's never, like, how do I explain this? Like, there's a lot of people that are like, well, how come you can't just prove that God exists then? And it's like, well, it's kind of like saying, I want you to be able to have your own journey and you to be able to make your own choices, but I'm going to prove you wrong anyway, type of thing, if that makes sense.
That, I guess it makes sense to an extent of, like, when you're experiencing something, to know the answer sheet makes the it pointless in a way. Not to say that, like, this is a test and you better get all the answers right. But it's like to come to the conclusion on your own, kind of like I was talking about this relationship that I have with one of my best friends. She it was really hard she would never take my advice. And I realized I can't say you need to do this because when I did that, that's how it worked. And I made this mistake. Then she always would go the opposite and have to learn the lesson on her own.
Yep.
So you had to just be like, well, how did this make you feel when you did that? You had to just help them understand themselves.
Yeah.
That's really
and
all
I truly
it was.
believe that that's what digging into the Bible does.
Mm-hmm.
It reveals your character by how you interpret the Bible.
Yeah.
And I feel like, in a way, that's exactly why it can be such either a dark or a beautiful journey, depending on who you are in that time in your life, because depending on that is going to be exactly how you interpret the Bible. And that's why it's interpreted in so many different ways.
Yeah. That's such a good point too, to be like, how can this one text be understood? When I get a text message, sometimes I'm like, do they mean this or do they mean this?
Yeah,
or are they in that kind of,
exactly.
what is the lighting that we're reading this
Yeah.
in? And so that makes sense that all these cults were made by money hungry, power hungry men. And they used the Bible to be like, that's exactly what God meant. God meant that we're all going to get a bunch of virgins when we die because that's what I want.
And that's why I feel like truly it reveals a person's true character.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think it is really important that I honestly think it's really interesting to see how everybody interprets the Bible, because it helps reveal kind of where they're at in life just by seeing how they interpret something that you've read before, something you've seen before, type of, you know what I mean? Like,
well, and there's so much text in the Bible. Which piece are you hyper focusing on?
Yeah.
And it's something that's internal. That's why you're hyper focusing on it. That's a really good point. So you had to go through hating God and then realizing, okay, so maybe I can look at it from a different angle. I feel like the way you describe it is kind of like, not necessarily how I feel about Dad, but in a sense where I hated Dad so much. And then I finally got to a point where I was like, this is hurting me
more than anybody else.
Yeah, it's not, hating him doesn't do anything to him.
Yeah.
So I need to come to a point of like indifference.
Yeah.
And realize that whether I like it or not, I actually did learn a lot of valuable lessons from Dad. Maybe not in a healthy way. Yeah, maybe like 90% of them were very unhealthy.
Right.
But I still am able to take what that situation was and make my life better. Not meaning I have to be in his life, not meaning I have to do anything with him, but be able to heal.
Yeah.
Finally. But I always hated though how Mom would be like, you can't hold on to the resentment. I'm like, he beat me. You gotta forgive him. And I just hated that. It's funny how like we can forgive so easy on that. We're supposed to forgive so easy on that. Mm-hmm. But when you're in there and you like held a boy's hand, for example, something you chose to do, you got to go through that process, right? It's like, it's so interesting how no accountability on these old dudes, but all this accountability on these children that they can also never live up to.
Yeah, and a very different perspective on forgiveness. It's like, I feel like now I can understand that forgiving is more about how it's affecting ourselves than earning a place in heaven.
Right, and I always like Dr. Ramani's. I saw that comment, Crystal, about I think she's going to re-say it about the 10 Commandments. Well, I'll answer that, sorry. What was we just saying? Oh, dang it, I had a really good point, but I also wanted Crystal to know that I was going to answer her question. We just were talking about
forgiveness.
Oh yeah, I love how Dr. Ramani talks about forgiveness being, because like I was saying, I hate the idea of like, oh, forgive them and then they do it again, and forgive them, they just walk all over you. And forgiveness is an excuse for someone to treat you terrible, as long as they say sorry. Dr. Ramani dives into the definition of forgiveness is not holding on to resentment. And so if you're forgiving someone and they still are doing that, it's not forgiveness because you're resenting them. Yeah. There was no forgiveness. Yeah. But there's this idea in religious culture that I have to have a forgiving heart, but it's like people don't understand what that actually means. Yeah. How do you forgive someone who's not changing? Yeah. What are you saying? Okay, you can slap me some more. Let me give you my cheek to slap me some more.
Yeah, there's a lot of misinterpretation, I feel like, about that as well. But it has everything to do with still holding somebody accountable for their actions, but not letting it affect you.
Yeah. There's the question. Lucy had a good question. Do the FLDS have 10 commandments? If so, how does having multiple wives not class as adultery? This was a question I had in the order. Did you ever ask that question in church? Okay. I asked this so many times. I'm like, okay, so thou shalt not commit adultery. was such a big rule that God put it in the 10 Commandments, right? Moses or whoever put it in the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not commit adultery. The whole order is committing adultery. But they would have the justification of, oh, but it's polygamy, and it's not going behind the wives of the backs. Polygamy is a higher law, it's a celestial law. And they would even say that when he made the plates, do you remember the story? Polygamy was on the plates, but when he came down and saw them worshiping the golden cow or whatever, he smashed those plates, and polygamy was on those plates. They're not ready for polygamy. So then they put adultery on there.
Yeah, well, because that's what their excuse was. We now have the higher laws that
were
go
smashed
above the 10 Commandments.
Mm-hmm.
And that's to me the craziest part is that they basically say the Book of Mormon is more important than the Bible.
Yeah, but they also, Dad would say that adultery is, doing it behind their back and da-da-da-da. But then I'm like, well, did you not do certain things that were not okayed by these wives? And also, Jesse has told his kids it's none of their wives' business who they're going forward on.
Yeah.
So what is adultery then?
Yep.
What the hell is adultery?
Where is that line? And
the interesting thing, too, is the double standard of women have to be loyal and faithful to the husband while he gets to do whatever.
Yeah.
That was another thing. It was like, so I listened to this polygamous wife. She was talking about how, well, there's certain lessons that we need to learn, and jealousy is one of them, and da-da-da. And I'm like, well, what is the man learning?
Yeah.
What lesson is the man learning by having his cake and eating it too, all the time? Not being held accountable for taking care of these kids, not being held accountable for paying for his wives, nothing.
And there's a lot of other places in this world that these things happen, but guess where they're at? Strip clubs. And
it's so true. There's so much
swinger parties,
Yeah. But that's the funny part is like they're like, oh, disgusting, these places where these women are just doing all of these nasty things with these men, and this one guy has all of these done it, and he's cheating on all of these women. And then they go and do it.
Yeah.
They're doing it right now.
Yeah.
And they talk smack on the men that are doing the same thing. And honestly, if not, like, what they're doing is worse, because they're manipulating women into thinking they have to do it, to dangling salvation. Mm-hmm. Now you have to do it. Okay, it's getting kind of dark, so it's probably time to go. Do you have anything to add? Hi, you guys. There's so many of you. There's 144 people watching. 71 likes. Again, if anyone is feeling inclined to donate to the retreat, I really appreciate it. And there is a link in the description box down below. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. What happened to the lights? The sun's going down. That's what happened. But this was a really good live. I always enjoy hanging out with you guys. What a pleasure that Cami got to be here and give her 2 cents. That was awesome. I really like to, this is my last thing, I love how we're obviously on different journeys in a lot of different aspects, but we're able to talk about it in a way where in the order it would be so unheard of, right? To be able to listen to your perspective of the Bible, and even if I have a different one, like we can have a very adult, healthy conversation and learn from each other. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the order, it was so my way or the mother-frickin' highway.
Yeah. Exactly.
And then no one's learning anything.
Yeah, because there's somebody that's always right, and there's
too much ego involved
happening.
Yep, it's so much of like, well, if you're right, then I'm wrong, and I can't let you be right because I don't want to be wrong. Yeah. Thank you for the donation, Todd. So sweet. I'm getting spoiled today. All right. I'm going to head out. They said, hi, Cami. Thanks for being here. Oh, miss you, Cami. It was nice hearing you again. Yeah, because they didn't see you, so they're like, nice to hear you. Okay. Love you guys. Yeah, Casey says she misses you. Oh, you guys are so sweet.
Miss you guys.
Okay. Love you guys. Thank you for joining, and I will see you very soon. Okay, bye.
Bye.